Just wanted to make sure that you guys knew of one thing. I worked at Food Stamps and Medicaid, and I ended up there was a worker who was engaged in illegal practice. She was a line staff, like me, line staff worker, and well, two other workers ratted her out. She was denying people Medicaid and food stamps and closing out cases that were not processed and denied due to failure to provide information. So she was ratted out, and what ended up happening was this worker thought it was me who did it. And once it came to light that occurred, the supervisor NF took corrective action, and she went ahead and reopened cases and pulled stuff out of the garbage cans that this worker was, at the end of the day, that this worker was placed in the garbage can, documents and so forth. And so my opinion at that time was, hot-headed as I was that that worker needed to be terminated, period. End of story. However, Wake County government had a substance abuse policy wherein you had to provide them an ability to rehabilitate or get services that they need because of their disease, whatever. I didn't agree with it. I tell you the truth. And as a result, one day, I typed up a resignation letter and put it on my supervisor's desk, chair. And the reason why is because I felt like so many people's lives were devastated due to the actions of this worker, and I didn't believe that could be rectified. I believe the only option was termination. Because of my disagreement with administration, I just said, hey, I'm not going to be a part of this. This person not taking their fair share of a full load, and so I was in Swinburne one day, and she approached me, and the reason how I found out that she thought it was me was she said, because of your effing ass, I got fired. I'm like, dang. It pissed me off even further, but I left it alone. I walked away. I mean, she had called me to come closer to her and talk, whispered that to me, and then it was fine, whatever. But that was my moral dilemma when I approached and encountered a similar type of crisis. So what ended up happening is, part of my ministry stuff includes working with other pastors and so forth. There was one pastor in particular. He had gotten food stamp Medicaid job, and he had a moral dilemma. His moral dilemma was that he helps people correct their lives and conform their lives to society's needs, and including addressing any criminal activity or whatever. But as a food stamp Medicaid worker, there's an absolute position. If you come across people that are not doing what they're supposed to get services, then you have to, by default, refer it over to program integrity and go ahead and advance a possibility of criminal charges or whatever. They have to come in and rectify the scenario. So his moral dilemma was he didn't want to work in that capacity in that environment. So he resigned for just out of moral reasons and so forth. So I just want to let you know what are options. I don't think the county has a policy of whistleblowing and non-discreet telling when they encounter fellow employees who might not be doing what they need to, as in CV, as in FL. Okay, how you doing? Today's sermon will be from Exodus 3 and 10. Therefore, go, I am sending you to Pharaoh, so that you may lead my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Lead my people out of Egypt. No, wait a minute. I thought it was lead my people out of Wake County Human Services. Wait, what? Did I get that wrong? I thought it was lead my people out of South Wilmington Trade Center. I don't know. I'm sort of confused because check this out. This is what happened. In every story, these stories anyway, there's a capacity. And in this scenario, it's in the capacity EO by RO, RO by himself. And the new capacity that is being presented is the capacity of RO for Universal House of Prayer. What is RayoAdvocacy.com, CarolinaJesus.com, whatever you want to call it, all have in common advocacy services. And with COVID, the launch date of Universal got delayed a lot. It followed under the heels of JFA Social Services in New York, which got interrupted when I had to move to North Carolina to take care of my dad. So that turned out to be a wash because I came down here. Tried to start it up while I was down here. It didn't work too well because I ended up getting married and all this other stuff, have kids. So all these intervening events took place. So Universal House of Prayer was incorporated, and it's taken on the same flavor as everything else. Rayo Advocacy in 2015 was started up. Then I decided to formalize it. Basically what it is helping people do basic stuff sometimes. Sometimes they just need a fax. Sometimes they need just a letter to be read to them. Sometimes it's just explaining how to apply for government benefits. All these different sometimes add to a lot of services free of charge. And one of the latest ones that ended up happening was an Arabic person came to me and asked me how to apply for disability benefits for his parents. Dude ended up being so grateful. Arabics have their own foods and customs and whatever. And he purchased and delivered and provided one of the most expensive gifts of Arabic candies, cookies, and jams and jellies and all that type of stuff because he was so grateful for the assistance, again, free of charge. To help him, he got approved. That was one of the latest ones. I did help with some Medicaid stuff recently too. But more importantly is the ministry is here to help. This is a church type. Everything is confidential. Who uses the services is confidential. Communications and interactions is confidential. So sources of information that I have are confidential. And whatever else that they decide to share with me is confidential. But that does not mean that the sharing of information does not help me to understand the dynamics of what is going on in our immediate community, society, and so forth. So capacities are EO by RO, and this time Universal House of Prayer by RO, incorporated. It's in North Carolina. Look it up, Secretary of State. Continuing. So, main thing was Moses had to lead the people of Egypt out of Egypt. So he had to leave the people of Israel, actually, the Jews, whatever you want to call them, out of Egypt.
Now, what's interesting is this: we have a 2021 story of this. Here's the scenario. When I started to go ahead and do my litigation for um, trying to have veteran and disabled affirmative action legislation. 2015, I started going down to the legislators' office buildings and gave them a copy of proposed legislation. My error was some legislators wanted to meet with me, and I sort of said, no, just look at the legislation and see if it's something you want to support. And I left it like that. I started, but then I started on a campaign of a paper trail, rather, of documenting, hey, look, all these positions I applied for, guess what? None have the end result of hiring a disabled person. So that is the gist, sort of what's been going on lately. Now, what we're talking about here is this: is that you have to establish sometimes when you're doing these types of lawsuits is a custom or a practice, uh, a policy, etc. That's the legal definitions of something that keeps on happening that's really against the law. And so the way you do it is this time here, I got paper trail from 2017. Positions to apply for. They got hired. Friends got hired for positions, and no open and competitive hiring. So I approached Angela Crawford. One of the government entities is Wake County Human Services, Wake County Government. Approach Angela Crawford and I say, hey, look, can you tell me who got hired for the positions I applied for? Why is it? I remember each time I went down to social services, it was always like I would look for disabled employees, and then I would ask. I'd ask. The last time was Doretha Jones, I believe it was. I asked her, well, when's the last time you saw a handicapped person here working? Gail was gone for 8 to 10 years. I was gone since 2004, something like that, 5. So 2004, 2005, bring it up to about 2015, no more disabled people hired. So you see, and you have the beginnings of the understanding of a custom and a practice of not hiring. But here's the interesting thing: mass exodus. I'm in the shopping centers. I'm in Target. I'm in Walmart. Keep running into workers, and the Hispanic workers now. I ran into some other workers too, African American workers like at Aldi's or whatever. And so they all know me. You know, I'm pretty, the one wheelchair in the place. Yeah, people remember you, and I may not remember you, but it was always like running into people. But mainly the Hispanics we're talking about. We're going to focus and stuff like this. The Hispanics always said that when Regina Pettyway came in after Ramon, it was a mass exodus. Mass exodus out of social service. What happened in Wake County government overall? What happened? The dynamics, the targeting, the retaliation, the prejudicial attitudes, the treatment, all caused, I'm talking based on interactions with the Hispanic folk, caused mass exodus of Hispanics from Wake County government, in particular Wake County Human Services. And when you combine it with observations, real, reasonable person standard observations, go down for services, Hispanics are gone, majority of black people there. Something happened like that at Zebulon Middle School. I think the mentality in these parts is, well, if you want to make the whole school of your race, you can. We sanction it. Go right ahead. And it's with our blessings because we will do nothing. We will allow it to transpire. It'll be not open and competitive hiring. It will be definitely an atmosphere of of prejudicial hiring, and none of that is any would include any type of affirmative action type hiring for the disabled or the veterans. That's it. So that was my beginning stages of trying to address that matter. So what ends up happening is this, continuing forward. Now, previous video discussed lower barrier and in the advocacy chain. I mean, right, our family has been affected, so my son says, "Hey, look, can you do something to help moms?" I said, "Okay, I help your mom or whatever," because she's being targeted, she's being retaliated against, and basically, it is today, 20th of August, and I sent out a lot of stuff. And you think anybody would respond officially from the government of Wake County? Anyone would officially respond from Angela Crawford's office, county attorney office, HR, anybody from the shelter center, or anybody from the housing department would respond? Of course not. Of course not. Waited over 10 days too, by the way. The only intervening thing that occurred was a meeting that transpired wherein I actually been going to church right around the corner from South Wilmington Street since April, actually. Had to go visit some big top friends of mine who have massive ministry out there. And so I was out there all the time, especially Wednesdays. It was Wednesdays and Sundays, sometimes on Saturdays and Fridays too. Went out there. And of course, I'm going to drive by South Wilmington Street or visit by some sort of way, pass by there. And then I saw, hey, look, it remained the same, but some of the observations and some of the videos were taken during those times of what the conditions were now and so forth. So staying on point is that haven't received any response back from the county. I just wanted to make sure that the commissioners know, that the human resources knows, that everybody knows, hey, look, I provided a space and time to go ahead and let you respond. Usually when you ask for something, you get 10 business days to respond back. And when you don't, now this is the reason why I said this, because if in your official capacity as a government employee, you fail to respond to legitimate requests for certain things and for information, for example, then it falls back for a person just to look at your practices, your policies, and so forth, to know that you are negligent in terms of allowing certain conditions to exist in your facilities. Let me give you an example. I worked at the shelter before it was a new shelter and after it became an old shelter. One of the policies that the county had and the shelter had was, hey, look, there's a government building, and as such, we prohibit drug use on or around the premises. On or around the premises. We prohibit certain illegal activities. And so it was always known that you couldn't do certain activities on or around the buildings of the government. And so as a worker, hey, I knew who had a bed for the night, who didn't, who was legally allowed to be on the premises and who wasn't. So partnered to enforce those regulations that the county and the state and so forth, promulgate in law. It was written law. To enforce that, hey, I would get asked by Officer Osborne. We'd be sitting outside or looking outside, whatever, and he would say, "Hey, Ronaldo, is that person legally allowed to be on the premises?" I said, "No, he's not there." "And what's he doing?" "Well, I'm looking at the dude. The dude looks like he's selling drugs." I said, "Yeah, that's my observation too." And so he asked me, "Well, would you like to trespass him?" I said, "Definitely yes." And so he asked me to complete a trespass form that he would serve. He went ahead, served the form. Of course, the person would be irate. The person did not want to leave. The person insisted on their right to stay and trespass, whatever. And guess what happened? They would get arrested. What was the intent of mine during that time? My intent was to follow city, state, local policy. Period. City, state, local policy. Enforcement of that. But more important, it's a heartfelt break. It's a heartbreak when you see these guys. They're trying to get off of drugs. They're trying to live a life. They're trying to get their pieces back together so they could get out the shelter. It was not helpful at all. Lunchtime, when they were leaving during the morning, afternoon when they were coming in, guess who's waiting out there? The drug dealers and everybody else, the chicken heads. Chicken heads, I learned. Only in North Carolina I learned what it is. It's a prostitute, $5 girl. They would be back there in the woods, whatever. Chicken heads, everything was back there. They would, all different types of arrangements would take place back there. So I felt bad for these guys, dude. So the enforcement of the policy was not just me as a worker enforcing policy. It was me as a worker being compassionate, as a human being compassionate, trying to ensure that these people had the right, the opportunity, the chance to succeed, to have a safe environment where they could go to work in the morning without being offered stuff, where they could come back, save their money, get all their savings, get housing, and leave, and complete the program. That was it. Safe housing, participation in the program, and success. That was what I was trying to do. And I was completing my goals, my duties as a county employee. No, as an urban employee. So, working on the county grounds. So, what ended up happening is this. Check this out. This is interesting, big time interesting. Was this. Through this ordeal, this whole scenario that's been going on where my ex-wife gets targeted, reasonable accommodation is denied. It was a flagrant push to pressure her to resign by denying her a reasonable accommodation. It's retaliation. I believe, me and my son believe. Now, my ex-wife, again, she doesn't know I'm even making this video, whatever. It's not party to this. It's what we're doing to help protect and right. So this is actually an official complaint against certain persons, government employees. Those specific government employees are Angela Crawford, one. Second one is Lorena McDowell. Third one is David Harris. The HR person that just resigned, you can't really attribute. I mean, it would be not worthwhile to go ahead and name her. She just left. The housing department HR person just left as of August 20th, way back a couple days ago. And so I'm not going to name her in any type of ongoing litigation because she just bounced out. But she was actually negligent in her duties anyway, but she's gone. And then you talk about the more concrete people that this um, complaint is directed to is Candace Brown and Frank Lawrence. Now, why Candace Brown? Because she's the one who took action that could have caused serious injury to my son's mother. Okay. And she is the one who is continually being claimed, we are alleging, in retaliatory actions against employees and falsification. Now, this is the other capacity. The Universal House of Prayer is falsifications of official government records and so forth. Here, let's get back to that. Let's go ahead and analyze that. Now, when we was at the shelter, I was at the shelter working there. We had shift notes, incident reports, progress notes, and so forth. You know, you're on shift, you leave a note for the next guys, next people coming in. It's very crucial, critical, absolutely safety issue, critical. First of all, you need to know what transpired. When officers would come responding to an incident, I was there writing down names, badge numbers, times when they came, arrived, came to the door, left, what actions they did, who was the employees involved, who were the residents involved, and so forth. My report was detailed, but my report was not the only one. Because anybody on duty, anybody around, had a duty and obligation also to write an incident report. Each person on duty and around had a different perspective and saw different things. So it was important that if my incident report missed something, no problema, because the other incident reports would be combined and passed on to the next shift. Let people know, hey, look, this occurred. Be careful. This resident was engaged in whatever guess. What's a guess now anyway? It's always been guess, but whatever. I don't understand that. But it would go ahead and be transmitted to the next shift because we were mandated when we came on shift. Read the incident reports, read the notes, see what happened on the last shift, and then assume your duties. Once you read it, assume your duties. And this is the one of the critical reasons why also is this is because residents, guests, are slick. They're smart. They're cunning. They will wait for a shift change and claim nothing happened the shift before or the day before or the night before. They will get amnesia magically. You try to enter the building as if they hadn't been barred, as if had no incident transpired. So, what do we have here? July, an incident occurs. Employee is threatened. Again, getting back to the last video, threatening a government employee is statutory. There's laws against it. It's state policy. You can't do it. All right. Employee gets threatened. Let me refresh this also. On August 12th, out here on my property, I had an incident. What ended up happening is I was talking to the owner of the next door property. I said, look, your stuff's on my property. I would like it removed. The daughter of the neighbor is very threatening. She starts taking steps towards me. The voices got loud. It wasn't so much with the owner of the property. It was more so with the family of the property owner and owners. And what ended up happening to the daughter, the youngest one, she's 20, 30 years old, younger than me. I remember when she used to go to high school and middle school, and they used to cross the lawn and stuff. So she's livid. She's livid. She's energy. She hates me. She wants to attack me. So she starts moving towards me. Okay. Now that moving towards me, combined with the argumentiveness, whatever, the loud voice, the body language, and so forth, leads me to believe I'm about to be attacked. So he comes in between us. The owner of the property I'm arguing with, he comes in between us, and he says to his daughter, "Do not cross the property line because he will arrest you. Do not come." So he had to go in between now. You understand? In between me and his daughter. Because his daughter was taking steps towards me and was communicating threats towards me in that manner. So, did I feel threatened? Did I feel like I was going to be assaulted? Of course I did. Of course I did. Did something transpire? Someone intervened to stop that scenario. So, you have an employee in July on county property who is enforcing the policy, enforcing shelter policy, and enforcing COVID protocol. He's enforcing it. There's a third party observing this. A worker on duty observes this. A male worker, and is the only one who writes a note on it. Only one. Now, this guest is threatening, as the note says, from this third party worker, being threatening, and not wanting to abide by policy. The worker in his rights is trying to enforce policy, right? So, more than one worker's present, including a supervisor. Now, supervisors are held to a higher standard, professional standard or whatever, even in supervisory standard. So they should know everything needs to be documented. Incident reports needs to be immediate by those who were present, whatever. Because not only that, when stuff like that happens during that shift, you got to let the next shift know. That was always crucial for us. Always, absolutely, positively crucial. So, no incident report is entered. Now, dereliction of duty, failure to do your duties, or is it, what would a reasonable person come to the conclusion of as to why, what are some of the possibilities of why an incident report would not be written to cover a situation where an employee is threatened while he was enforcing policy? And why is it that because an employee was threatened, that the guest wasn't removed immediately or written up immediately? And when those things don't transpire, that's a big problem because it shows bias. Bias, in this scenario, it is Candace Brown. When you consider that with other, and combine it with, I mean, you might have a bad day. Maybe you forgot to do an incident report. Maybe, something transpired and you couldn't get it done, whatever. But it's crucial, because those reports also go to the supervisory staff and higher ups to let them know how the shelter is doing, how the shelter is functioning, whatever. But when you combine it with other acts that are alleged, for example, what's also alleged here is that not just dealing with lower barrier and the complexities and the trouble that you get with that all by itself, but then if you have an employee that's in the supervisor or above position and using that position or failing to have their duties, execute their duties, and maybe we are alleging, complaining of, that they are using the position in a prejudicial manner to go ahead and target other employees. And not just that the low barrier is causing a bad environment, an unsafe environment for workers, but also what you end up happening is that if the environment, the working environment, it becomes hostile further, even worse, more dangerous, even worse by the acts of individual employees, then you have an even bigger problem. So what evidence may you have or assumptions or conclusions to support that type of allegation. Well, you have it is alleged uh, upon based on information and belief. It is alleged that the same supervisor, CB Candace Brown, um, targeted security. Now, if in a low barrier scenario you need more security, you need more protection for workers, why are you targeting allied security staff who are enforcing city, state, and federal policy of no drug use on the facility? You're targeting them. This is what is alleged. Now, grievance reports are public, just like dismissals are public, just like complaints are public. When you dismiss a government employee, according to general statute, that is public. It's published. The person is being dismissed. This is the cause of action, whatever. So those type of scenarios, complaints, public. Okay, as long as you redact confidential information like the names of people who use shelters, whatever. That's the extent of publishing certain actions. So when you have an allied security guard who's assigned to the center, who routinely gets targeted, and other staff members hear and know that one of the reasons why security is being targeted is because they're enforcing safety protocol, laws, policies, and regulations in shelter. Safety protocol, laws, policies, and regulations, including ensuring that, for example, a person who's drunk almost crashes residents and staff's cars in the parking lot is confronted and so forth. All that is within the scope of his duties. And if someone goes ahead and, as a security person, does that duty and addresses and confronts those types of scenario and issues, then it cannot be, should not be, that that employee is being targeted by a supervisory staff person for executing his duties. That takes low barrier to a prejudicial under color of law scenario wherein it is not just a policy that's a problem, but it's also personal prejudices and acts by supervisors, government employees that are not supported by city, state, local laws or shelter policy. So you're creating a worse environment. So if this employee, okay, so the allied dude is trying to do his job. Okay, he does like me when I was there, saying, "Hey, look, county state policy, I'm going to go ahead and enforce it, whatever." But then he gets attacked consistently. His job gets threatened. Okay, by Candace Brown. Okay, so these are the allegations, and this is a consistent pattern. Okay, so what's interesting again is that if you're going to be terminated, that's public record, but also termination means you should have due process. It also means that you should have access to videos, and the facility has a lot of cameras, whatever, and every statements from residents and so forth. So and employees that were present. So all that, what you're showing here is this: by targeting the allied security guards, you are showing that you are not going to follow the very policies you were hired to enforce. So you got a problem with your own. And then the charging document for a poor employee for dismissal was, "Hey, look, reasonable person standard." This is not what a reasonable person standard. You need to greet guests courteously. The cited citation. You got to greet guests courteously, and all this other stuff is cited. Now, this is interesting because that's not the right citation. In that, if you have a hostile environment wherein your life is being threatened, okay. Now, the accounts of differing account. Like one employee might say, "I don't think anything transpired. I'm not in agreement with necessarily with that it was even an incident because they didn't see it as an incident, whereas another employee actually saw it as an incident because that employee, through that filter of that employee's eyes, was, hey, look, there was a confrontation. This resident got hostile. So it is prudent and pertinent that you have all statements from all employees, all perspectives, and that they are there. Why? Because here you have a history of, in that facility, of a previous worker in a supervisory capacity was not following county policy, state and criminal law, and actually went in and changed records of entries of reports by workers to hide the fact that she was doing inappropriate things. So documentation is important not just for safety reasons, and the lack of documentation shows that you don't want to do your job. You were hired to enforce policy and be a supervisor, and instead you going ahead and creating this environment that's even worse than the low barrier that's already existent. So what you end up happening is this, is that due process means, hey, look, I need these people to be present. I need the video footage. And don't apply a standard that does not work. A reasonable person standard and the policy that you cite in your document as you need to treat persons courteous, that policy does not pertain to being attacked verbally also. And being in a scenario where you might be physically attacked, which is what a third-party employee thought was actually transpiring. So, and then the most noted thing again is that if you are in a habit of targeting people who are trying to enforce policy, then the complaint has to be that you are not doing your job. And again, in scenarios where an employee and residents are guests are verbal, go physically towards an employee and so forth, those are all acts that would go ahead and support a claim that a government employee was threatened. And you got to protect that government employee. But when you don't, remember the Blanche scenario happened because government employees did their job, noted certain irregularities in the notes, in the reports, inside in synopsis and whatever, and then she had to go back and change them. So the paper trail helps to guide upper administrative staff, the policymakers, and so forth, and let others know what's happening at the shelter. And it's a paper trail that can be followed. So I say this because you got cameras. You really do. Just one report. The facility got cameras and everything, and it's, you need cameras on that facility. But then I would think and know due process rights is if you are discharging an employee, dismissing them, firing them, then they're entitled to go ahead and grievance and appeal the decision. But also, what is demanded in this complaint from EO by RO is an investigation that is being requested, not just as a ministry person advocating, okay, Universal House of Prayer advocating on the behalf of an individual, but also as EO by RO, okay, because that environment is where his mother got to work. His mother has to work in that environment, hostile environment, wherein people are retaliated against by certain supervisors. Okay, that action of denial, again, we believe a reasonable person standard would come to the same conclusion using that. A jury would come to the same conclusion that all of a sudden writing someone up for using the back parking lot because you had medical documentation provided years ago, and then recent submission of a reasonable accommodation request. So when your hiring practice, your lack of affirmative action hiring practice, and the environment you have by certain people failing to investigate. I mean, when you have a termination, think about this here. It goes to the county attorney. Before any termination is signed off on, it's supposed to go to the county attorney. What's interesting is that when you see the charging document supporting a dismissal, you don't see the signature of a county attorney. You don't see the signature of the other relevant people. The housing department, key person, HR person. You don't see those signatures also supporting that dismissal on that document that was sent. Now, if you only see, like, for example, a signature of someone like Frank Lawrence, then you come to question, like, well, was this properly investigated prior to that action being complete? Our complaint is no. Our complaint is that you have Candace Brown, Frank Lawrence, engaging in these hostile retaliatory actions that manifest itself in stuff like being pressured to resign because you're going to be denied a reasonable accommodation and being put at risk of injury. And also the most important is creating a hostile work environment that far exceeds the standard of local area, because individuals are using their position to just go ahead and retaliate and target and so forth. That's our complaint. And the other thing, it was signed off by two people. Wasn't just one person acting on their own, Candace Brown. The action went through to Frank Lawrence, especially with reference to that employee who was just. Let me point it to you. Give you another example, because the law really hates. Oh, it just was a one-time incident. The law hates when you bring lawsuits and whatever when it's just a one-time incident, dude. Leave it alone. It's not customary practice. It's not customary policy, whatever. None of that. So you have a resident using a particular area of the facility. And let's say they want to use something in the facility, in that area. I want to be able to do such and such in that area. Employees alone. When the resident is making the request, the employee says, hey, look, when I get to it, I'm going back to the front. When I get a chance, I'll address your needs. and go ahead and um, help you out. But I need to go back to my designated work area, make sure everything's okay, and then I come back. Oh no, person's like, no, no, you need to handle it now. And then the same thing like what happened to me and what happened to Orlando, the person gets into their space, moves up in a threatening manner, boisterous, loud, argumentative, and then takes that additional step moving forward. And then the out of one always has the right to protect themselves. At that moment's time, the person will say, "You better give back." Use an unsavory word. Again, this person was just one on one with this other person who was belligerent and threatening a government employee. So, what ends up happening? Oh, Frank Lawrence, the supervisor. Did you say that? Yeah, I said it. Yeah, I said it. They were threatening me, whatever. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, I did that because he was coming at me. All right. So, okay. The employee gets written up for inappropriate behavior. Wow. Geez, the guy threatening the employee. But check this out. Frank Lawrence never writes up the guest who was threatening. So when you have supervisors working in tandem to not just follow or disobey, in this scenario, is disobey state law. When they're working in tandem to disobey state law and target employees, and further beyond the risk that is associated with hostile or with lower barrier, then you taking targeting issues wherein you're going around the shelter and telling other employees, well, if a resident or guest came to me, I will go ahead and take the resident or guest words over an employee any day of the week. That's so unprofessional, so inappropriate. And I'm not sure how this complaint addresses that, saying, hey, look, you have a problem, and that someone, David Harris, going up the chain, David Harris, Lorena, and HR up to the top, wherein you've had this non-open and competitive environment that lets them hire their friends. And you got to ask a basic question, basic thing. How did you get a scenario when Ametha Smith, a longtime friend of Candace Brown, are there working side by side? How do you get these types of scenarios, too? And again, this is also addressing that other lack of evidence of lack of open and competitive employment, in that you had those other scenarios where, positions are open for like 2-3 days, and then they're, closed and whatever, and somehow their friends get hired, whatever. And the allegations also include things like, well, because you hired your friend, then they run all up over you and say, well, I'm not working today, but you need to go ahead and sign or do something where I get my compensation, allegedly, based on information and belief. So the complaint is that you have, we want this to be thoroughly investigated and responded to. We, because it's going to continue. There was another letter post a meeting with HR and Frank Lawrence and Candace Brown, post wherein it looks like, when you read the language of the letter, it looks like Frank Lawrence is saying, hey, look, because you asked for reasonable accommodations, we're going to go ahead and attack you now on the fact that you can't do the essential duties of your job. This letter is being sent to a person who works 2 jobs and leaves one to go work at another. The county knows it. Report it to the county. So she's working at 2 shelters, multiple days out the week, and hasn't been failing to do her duties, but yet you trying to turn a reasonable accommodation into a cause for termination. Dang, Frank, really? Um, we're asking for complete investigation into these complaints. That includes the grievance by Orlando McLean. Really, because it seems like it's just a continual pattern. HR, not just HR for housing department, but HR overall, seems like because they did not fail to go ahead and have open and competitive hiring, fail to have affirmative action, you have these scenarios where people just hiring their friends and then have to get rid of and set up people just an adverse that goes beyond the local barrier. Hope this helps outline what's going on. Thank you. Hopefully you'll respond. CarolinaJesus.com, Universal House of Prayer, and see, you have my email address. I mean, everyone gets this, so thank you. I hope to hear from you. If not, your silence can be interpreted as admissions. Tell you the truth, you can't say it's confidential because these stuff is public record, dude. You go to terminate. The statute says once you go to terminate, it's no longer confidential. It's public record, dude. So complaints against government employees are public record, dude. Especially when they're at a public shelter. God bless. Take care. And this is also was being videotaped because a lot of my friends said they had to leave social services and all the different departments because they were targeted, dude. And it's Hispanics. So if you're not black, oh, you got a problem, dude. Thank you. God bless. See you. Have a nice day.
Safeguards, procedures, and so forth. Apparently, county policy indicates that, before termination of an employee, it has to go all the way up to the county attorney's office. Now, what is a safeguard to ensure that everyone has properly acted prior to going ahead and terminating an employee? Well, one safeguard is when you have in your supervisory document some sort of indication there was oversight in an investigation. But more importantly, if you have a terminating document, okay, if you have a terminating document, then what you end up happening is that terminating document should have signatures of the county attorney, your chief HR central office person, and in my opinion, by the way, this is my opinion, and a department head, not just lines, supervisory staff, but higher ups, because the termination is very adverse and impacts a lot of. And so when you have a terminating document that is just signed by supervisory staff, that comes into question is did other staff members, upper management, do their due diligence and are not guilty of negligence, and that they investigated all the aspects of a condition or incident that led to the termination of an employee. That is the question, and you can't ascertain that when a terminating document, is only signed by one supervisor who wasn't even present for the incident. So at minimum, for example, if a direct supervisor accuses the line staff, then the terminating document should at least include the direct supervisor's signature and or her supervisor above her at if and when that supervisor conducted a thorough investigation. But that would be for disciplinary actions, I would believe, because if you're going to go all the way to termination, then I would think due diligence would require having a terminating document that has all these other signatures on it to make sure, hey, look, we did our job. But here, especially if you have an allegation that two supervisory staff persons are aiding and abetting each other and acting with prejudice in their positions, ministerial positions, again, and acting out of retaliation and so forth, then you got a problem in that it doesn't indicate or show that, hey, it went to, for example, David Harris, with David Harris' signature on the terminating document. It went to Lorena, or with Lorena's signature. It went to Nora, or it went to Angela Crawford. Those apps, or more importantly, the most important is that it went to Scott Warren and the county attorney. So, and they did their due diligence. You can't ascertain that when a document only has one signature, and it's one signature that's on that document. The terminating document is the signature of someone who wasn't even present for an incident. That's really bad, and I would think that it of itself, it would warrant negligence and a negligent lawsuit. I mean, that's it. I mean, Tort Claims Act and $1 million limit. Just putting that out there. Hopefully y'all understand. Let me say this, is that when you have incidents so close to each other occurring, it would actually start to question, well, why are these incidents so close and occurring? Why is one employee being terminated, and right next to that employee being terminated, shortly thereafter, you have the beginnings of retaliatory attacks against another employee? That sort of goes again and again. I'm trying to show this here, that if you had open and competitive hiring, and if you had affirmative action hiring policies and practices, then you would probably avoid the majority of these types of scenarios. That I'm hoping that you guys really understand the main focus of any complaints against Candace Brown, Frank Lawrence, for allegations of fraudulent falsification of records, retaliation, and so forth, that you need to understand that perhaps you might need to fix your policy and practices. And the other thing is this, is that you need to have a policy and practice that specifically addresses what is acceptable conduct when an employee is being threatened with physical violence and has had a threat communicated to him or her. That is not what is being cited in a terminating document of Orlando McLean. What you cited was basically from a reasonable person. Anyone reading that be like, well, if a guest comes to the center, this is how you need to treat them, and this is how you need to address yourself. It does. I don't think that citation is proper. You don't have enough policy to go ahead and cover. Well, what happens if? What happens if you're threatened? Whatever. And the other thing is this: is that it's interesting in this scenario is that the total failure to submit incident reports and have staff submit incident reports so that other shifts can see it, that's dereliction of your own duties. I understand that, for example, the staff in question may have not viewed it as an incident, whatever, but at least one of the staff did view it as an incident. And then what ends up happening is this: if you're, as a supervisor, saying, well, you went ahead and was engaging in unacceptable physical motions and verbal altercations, and it had to be separated, then you know what? you're going to have policy that if it's clear that that employee would have been an immediate threat, and you have to explain why you didn't even file documentation to go ahead and show that that incident even occurred. So, in other words, you it looks like a reasonable personal standard here upon information and belief again is that it looks like that what ends up happening is that you're just trying to do stuff in a sneaky way, wherein or upper management doesn't see and other auditors won't see that that incident even occurred. So federal auditors or state auditors that would come in, they wouldn't even find that. So you're deliberately omitting crucial information about incidents that occurred, and the regulators won't even ever see it because you never included it. So you yourself as a supervisor are guilty of not doing your duties, and I think that actually because you're held to a higher standard that you deserve to be terminated, dude. That's my professional opinion based on having a master's degree in political science, based on having a degree in sociology, and based on years of experience in dealing with this population and so forth. God bless. See you.